Have you ever felt judged? Have you ever had it where you went out to the bar or the club, or maybe it was something even like a little bit like lesser intimidating or supposed to be, right? Like a wedding, or maybe it was like your little cousin's birthday party, and because you were sitting alone, or you went and tried to dance, or you approached somebody, or you approached a group of people, you felt like all the eyes were on you. Or maybe you're afraid to go to the gym. And the reason you're afraid to go to the gym is because you know that you're not familiar with all of the equipment, and so you're afraid of doing something incorrectly. Or maybe it's because you've been neglecting your muscles like I have, and you're afraid that not doing as much weight as everyone else there is going to attract attention, and people are going to like go over to the corner and snicker and laugh and say, oh, look at this guy. Look at him doing it wrong. What a fool. He won't last long. Well, I've been there, my friend. I feel for you, and that's why in this video what I want to really discuss is this concept of judgment, the feeling that we are being watched, and not only that we have the attention on us, but that we're being judged. And not only that, but we're being judged in a negative light, and that's the most important thing. But before we get there, I want to make a couple of distinctions. So in this video, there's going to be 3 sections. The first is making the distinction between what is real and what is imagined, what is actually there, the judgment that is actually on us and the attention that's on us before that, versus what's just in our head when we're imagining the eyes are on us and imagining that those eyes are negatively judgmental eyes. And then the distinction in the second section is going to be about the distinction between when the attention is actually on us, when it's actually negative judgment versus when it's just positive judgment, because that can happen too. And I've had it have had it happen on multiple occasions as well. So, and then the final section is perhaps the most important one for this video, this whole concept of judgment and dealing with it, is the presence of negative judgment. I know that that's what you're all afraid of, what you're all concerned with. I know that that's, what I'm, it's the most, inhibiting for me as well. And I think the most succinct way to put it, the most feared thing for most of us is that we feel like we're being judged in such a way where somebody else doesn't feel like we belong. They think that we're not welcome, and that I know can be very, like I already said, inhibiting. And so that is what we're going to be talking about in this video. Let's go ahead and start with the difference between what is real and what is just in our heads. The first point that I want to make to you can be summed up as follows. You are not as visible or interesting, perhaps, as you think you are. And I mean that in the best way possible. I don't know if you've noticed this, but people typically are very self-absorbed. So with the whole gym example, when you go to the gym, do you really think that people are they're so concerned with you and what you're doing that they're actually going to stop what they're doing just to point you out and make sure everybody sees that you're doing the equipment wrong, or you're not pushing that much weight, or even something outside of the gym, maybe let's say that you approach a girl in the line at Starbucks, or if you approach some group of people at the grocery store or something. Do you really think that there's even enough mental capacity left over from their own shit going on and their own concerns to stop everything they're doing and point and put their hand over their mouth and say, oh, he's doing something out of the ordinary? No, that's not how we work. When I say that we're, what was the word I used? We're self-absorbed. I don't mean that as an insult. It's just the way that we're wired. You and I included, we have enough of our own things going on to really worry that much about someone doing something out of the ordinary. If you do happen to come across that sort of situation, here's the most that's going to happen. Everybody's on their phones these days. They're gonna hear it. They're gonna hear something going on, and they're gonna look up. And they're gonna be like, oh, something interesting going on, because they don't want to miss out. They're like a squirrel like that. You're gonna look, and they're gonna see you, and they're gonna go right back to their phone. That's about it. That's about it. And the way, just for something to kind of cling on to and take away from this section, here's the way I want to really put it to you. People don't give a shit about you, dude. Just realize that. They don't give a shit about you. They're gonna, like I said, they're gonna pay a little bit of attention for maybe half a second, and they're gonna go right back to what they're doing. So if you can handle that split second of attention that's pressure, and then it just goes right back to normal, then you're good to go. And that's I hope that offers you a little bit of consolation. Last thing here before moving on to the next point, if you want to prove that to yourself, the whole, people don't really give a shit about you, just consider your own experience. Are you really without so much of your own things to take care of, that when you go out to a club or something, your first thing that you cling to is how, like, opportunities that you can point other people out and how they're messing up, like putting other people down. If you are, my friend, I hate to tell you, you're the one that is the loser. If that guy is around, aren't they the loser? I mean, that's my opinion. So, all right, let's just go ahead and move on now to the next point, which is the distinction between when that is actually real. So this is the distinction between what is real and what is imagined. And the case I'm making is that oftentimes it's just imagined, it's just purely in our head. And, you know, when we think that all the attention is on us, it's more likely that it's just, you know, that maybe like the little squirrel look for half a second and then they'll look back. That's more likely. The distinction in the next section is about when that is actually the case and the eyes are on us and it's more sustained attention because we are doing something so interesting, so out of the ordinary. When it is the case, the distinction between that being negative judgment versus being actually positive judgment, and why you should actually assume the best. So let's get into it. So we understand now that we're not the center of the universe. People generally are too self-absorbed. They don't to care that much about whatever we have going on, to notice or care that much when we do something out of the ordinary. And even if they do, it's not going to be for that long. They're going to look up for maybe 2-3 seconds, and then they're going to go right back to whatever they were doing. But let's say that that's not the case. Let's say that you're doing something that's super out of the ordinary, super interesting to people. Like, let's say that you're dancing silly, you're dancing super wild, or let's say you approach somebody in a super outrageous manner or in a super outrageous context. Like one of my favorite examples, because I'm so afraid of doing something like this, is approaching a girl at the line at Starbucks. And because of that, people are looking at you and they're staring dead at you, and they keep looking at you because it's so interesting whatever you're doing. And let's take it even one step further. They're not just looking, but they're smiling, they're laughing, they're snickering with their friends, they're giggling with their friends, and maybe even they're pointing, and they keep doing that. So what? So they're getting a kick out of you. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it in a disapproving, negative light. And I would even say that that's probably less likely. That's like the exception. Most of the time, at least in my experience, if I've ever had something like that, and I'll share with you a story before we wrap up this section. Most of the time, I've had it where people were actually genuinely inspired. They were looking up to me because I was doing something that was so ballsy, you know. They looked up to they respected the fact that I was so willing to stick my neck out and, you know, potentially embarrass myself and make that mistake or make those mistakes. And because of that, I mean, they literally, you know, you can interpret it in the negative way, which is like they're judgmental in that negative way. They don't approve, they don't feel like I belong, or they're like jealous or whatever. But on the other side of that, I've more often had it where they're genuinely inspired, and they even think like, wow, this guy's cool, you know, and I'm really hoping that he approaches me. Or maybe, you know, at the very least, maybe they hope that you surround themselves in their proximity so that they have the opportunity to approach you because they're genuinely interested in maybe becoming your friend. And I've had that happen myself. So I'm going to share with you a story, and then we'll wrap up this section and move on to the final one. I was at a bar one time, and out of those examples that I gave you, what I was doing was I was dancing like a fucking madman, I love to do. I was on the dance floor, I was dancing super wild, super loose, and I was in that sort of upward momentum state, like I've discussed in other videos. And because of that, I was just like completely carefree, completely careless, and anyway, I as I was dancing, I sort of looked over at one point, and I noticed there was a guy and a girl sitting next to him who I assumed would be his girlfriend, sitting on the side of the dance floor, and they were looking at me. And while I was dancing, and they were kind of like, it was just very clear that they were like snickering and kind of like laughing, like, you know, the general interpretation on my part was they were blown away. Like they couldn't believe how I was dancing and that I was doing it alone. And they were doing that, like, you know, with like pointing and smiling, whatever, in my direction. So, you know, the suggestion I'm giving you here is to assume the best. I didn't necessarily do that, and I'll be honest about that. I didn't assume the best in that situation, but I definitely didn't either assume the worst. And so, you know, really what I did is I just kind of like ignored it. I didn't pay it much attention at all, and I just continued dancing. But had I actually assumed the best, like I'm encouraging you to do here, I would have been validated later on in the night, because here's what happened. Later on, that guy actually came up to me and the first thing he said was, "All right, man, honest question." And that alone, before I tell you what the question he asked me was, that alone tells me two things. The first was, he's acknowledging that he saw me earlier, and he's acknowledging that he knows that I saw him see me earlier. So he knows that I saw him see me earlier, and he knows therefore that I know that he was watching earlier. So anyway, he's acknowledging that. He's acknowledging that he saw me and that he knows he saw me, or that he knows that I know that he saw me. The next thing is that by saying honest question, man, he's telling me basically, like, the translation is, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to put you down. And I was like, sweet, I picked up on that right away. So the question was, here it was, all right, man, honest question. How old are you? And so that told me, I told you the kind of general interpretation from earlier was that they were blown away. So when he asked me honest question, how old are you? That kind of like drew back to that memory of like when he was looking, and it kind of made me assume that part of the interpretation or part of like his being blown away, their being blown away, was that I didn't look old enough to even be at the bar. And I'm aware, I have a baby face. You don't have to remind me. If you wish to, that's totally cool. But he told me that, and it was just in a very fun, lighthearted manner. And so I fucked with him a little bit. I was like, oh, I'm 16. And he's like, what? No way, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, man, I'm just kidding. I'm 22 or 23. I think I was 22 at the time. So long story short, my point is, I didn't necessarily assume the best in that situation, but had I done that, I would have been right. He never explicitly told me this, but my assumption was the kind of vibration of his speaking with me, the feeling that I got from him was he was inspired. He looked up to me. He respected my confidence, my fearlessness to do something so out of the ordinary. So it wasn't out of the ordinary. I was on the dance floor, but it was just like me doing it alone and me doing it sober. He just, he looked up to that. He respected that I was willing to stick my neck out in that way and doing it without like the push of anyone behind me, like a buddy saying, oh, I dare you to do it. So I got that interpretation, and therefore, assuming the best, I would have been 100% validated. So yeah, that's it for this section. I've told you the story. Let's go ahead and move on now to the final section, which is when that presence of negative judgment is in fact the case, and what is the best way to deal with it. So the final point I want to make here before moving on to the summary of what all has been covered is acknowledging the presence of actual negative judgment. When it is the case that those eyes are on you, and those eyes are not just on you, but they're in fact negatively judgmental, so they're not like, you've got the attention and it's not necessarily positive attention, but it is in fact like a judgmental, disapproving type of energy or type of attention. How to deal with that. And I'm not going to say cope, that would be the wrong word. How to like handle that. And the reason I even want to talk about this at all when it comes to this whole judgment, topic, is because as much as I try to just like ignore the negative or just minimize my attention towards it, because I know it's much more helpful to really emphasize the positive and aim towards it and just like focus on it exclusively, the negative side of this story, this judgment thing, does exist. It is a reality, and if you just completely ignore it and you're not expecting it, then you're kind of going in with only a forehand in tennis and not the backhand. You're going in you're not going in fully prepared. And so I want to really speak on it, because it is an inevitable part of this journey that you're on, my friend. And the reason for that is because as you move up, and this applies to any discipline that you work on for yourself, as you move up and you're breaking yourself out of this shell, other people will see that, and they're seeing that essentially you're breaking out of a shell and you're kind of moving forward in a way that they are too afraid. They don't feel that they have the courage to do so themselves. And so that will inspire naturally a lot of envy, a lot of hatred towards you. And it's not your fault, you're just doing your best to advance yourself. But because they feel like they aren't there yet, or they just don't have enough self-love, enough self-trust to do it themselves, instead of allowing their sight of you to inspire them, or like instead of feeling like maybe they could learn from you or something like that, they want to tear you down, or they want to, like, you know, criticize you, or, you know, discredit you, or whatever else. And that, so, you know, that will happen. And, you know, that's why I even want to talk about it at all. I want to prepare you, because it will happen. So the first observation is this: the truly negative, when that does happen, those people have absolutely no power over you or your attitude. And really, I mean, this applies to everybody, the positive and the negative. Nobody can move you or your demeanor, your mood, without your permission. Nobody can destroy your day, nobody can ruin your night, nobody can kill your confidence unless you allow them to. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but the reason probably that it's cliche is because it's so true. It is completely up to us to allow or not allow somebody to change our entire demeanor. I mean, there's sort of like a distinction there. It's of course the case, like if I get rejected by a girl, for example, it's not like I'm just gonna choose like, oh, that didn't hurt. I would be in denial. Of course, it pings a little bit, and it like might hurt a little bit. You know, there might be a little bit of pain there. But the choice comes from whether I allow that ping to linger. If I allow it to linger and grow, and then I allow that to kind of be spread out to other people that I interact with, and I allow it to just kill my confidence and ruin my entire night or my entire day, that's my choice. And so, you know, I suppose the real like distinction is it pinging me, that wasn't my choice. But me holding it and not letting it go, and then, you know, because I've held it, now I'm kind of sharing it with other people, and so I kind of become that source, and now I maybe reject somebody, or I you know, like I accidentally feel like I've got like that judgmental energy or whatever it is. Sorry guys, it's windy out here. I need to get some sort of weight. Because I've held it in myself, now I'm carrying it into the rest of my interactions, and now I've become that sort of negative source of energy, or that source of negative excuse me, and that source of negative energy. That is my choice. And I understand, you know, this whole thing of like taking responsibility, taking responsibility, as Stephen Covey would say. It might sound a little bit easier said perhaps than applied, but to help you with that, if you are kind of struggling, you feel like maybe you don't trust yourself enough to actually be like taking responsibility, you know, like having the ping but not necessarily holding it, like just letting it go. If you don't have that trust, let me offer you this. Understand when somebody does, like, you know, that example of rejecting you, or if it's on the more judgmental side, like if somebody I don't know, like calls out your shoes, or they say you have a weird little beard and it doesn't match up with your baby face, or something else like that. Understand, even if they're trying to make it personal like that, it's probably, well, I guess, I don't know, if they're trying to make it personal, it's probably not about you. And when I say that, like, it could be, but let me before I get there, if you, like, let's say that you approach a girl on the street, if she rejects you, and she rejects you harshly, and she like completely cuts you off, she like maybe calls you a bad name or something, you know, even though it hurts and it like might be very easy to assume that it's about you, and like, you know, you can personalize it in that way, it's probably not, you know. I mean, it's probably more likely that she's just in a bad mood. Maybe her dog died that day, maybe she just got dumped by her boyfriend, maybe she's not necessarily in a bad mood, maybe she's just like on her way to something and she's in a rush and she's like running late, and she doesn't need some idiot in her eyes, you know. It's not, I know that you're not an idiot, my friend, I know that you're a cool guy, but she doesn't know that, and in her eyes, some guy stopping her on the street is just like some idiot that's getting in her way. And so, you know, she's not out to get you, and for that reason, you should just understand that it's not probably about you, and therefore you shouldn't take it personally. However, and this is my next thing that I was trying to get to, I was kind of jumping ahead of myself, even if the person that is judging you in a negative way is trying to make it personal, like they're calling you out with like I said, the whole beard or the baby face, or, you know, like you have fucked up shoes or whatever it is, even if they're trying to make it personal like that, that negative judgment, it's always a reflection of self-hatred. Of course, there's the exception of like it could just be that they're in a bad mood or whatever, but if it is truly like they're aiming to put you down, that negativity in themselves is always a reflection of their self-hatred, their lack of self-acceptance, their lack of self-love, self-respect. And you know how to kind of like prove that to yourself. Just consider, I mean, if you ran across a person that was truly comfortable with themselves, or maybe just ask yourself, if you are truly comfortable with yourself and truly accepting of who you are, do you at all have the urge to put other people down? No, of course not, because you already know you're a winner, or if not like a winner, you already know you're of value. You don't have to put other people down in order to feel okay within yourself. You know, so if somebody else is doing that, it's because they have that lack of self-love. And for that reason, you should allow that observation that insecurity is a very core source of negativity in other people, and that negative judgment. Allow that observation to make it so that their voice, their like imposing, has absolutely zero merit in your eyes. But with that said, I understand this can be a little bit dicey. I don't want you to use this as an excuse, my friend, to become that judgmental person yourself. Like you see that negative judgment from other people, and now all of a sudden you're the judgmental person. Like, oh, that person's insecure. Like, oh, she just did that. She's putting somebody else down. Fuck them. They're not of any value. That's not the way to go either, because now all of a sudden you've become that judgmental presence. If you, I'm not sure again if you're Christian like I am, but it says in the Bible, "Judge not, lest you be judged." So that's just a sort of a side note, I suppose. Don't become what you're doing your best to defend yourself against. That is a very real risk if you don't take this seriously. And you're just sorry guys. Still okay. All right. Yeah, don't become what you're defending against. And then the last thing that I'll say about that before moving on to this summary, there's a very big difference between that negative judgment, that like unfounded, without merit judgment from other people, where they're just like criticizing you, or maybe they're giving their 2 cents, but it's not necessarily an offer of genuine value, but more so it's like a manipulation tactic. There's a difference between that, a very big difference between that and truly constructive criticism, where someone is actually wanting to give you helpful feedback, and they're doing it in such a way where it's not manipulative. They actually are like, they know that they don't need anything from you, and you can just feel that. You can feel their non-neediness, like we talked about in that other video. And because of that, you know that they're actually trying to offer you value. They actually want to like say, hey, like I noticed this and this was really cool, but maybe this would help you out a little bit more. I feel like that, it's important to make this distinction. I'm so sorry, guys. I promise to get some sort of like sandbag or something, because this is really annoying me right now. I'm sure it's not fun for you guys either. So it's important to make that distinction, the constructive criticism versus the just unfounded judgment. It's important to make that distinction, because if you just like completely focus on blocking out the negative, then you're not going to have any room to accept truly well-intentioned, and not just well-intentioned, but also like helpful feedback. And then on the other side, if you only are like taking everybody's advice, and you're only like worried about respecting, the feedback of others, then that negative judgment that's inevitably going to come will very like, it'll throw you off your path and kill your confidence. And so make that distinction. And I'm not really, yeah, that's pretty much it. Sorry, I've been a little bit head rattled because of the wind knocking over my tripod, but let's just go ahead and move on now. Let's wrap up with this summary of all the points that's been made. All right, guys, let's just quickly sum up here, because this video is already much longer than I was hoping it would be. I'm going to put on the screen now a diagram I came up with that I think really summarizes very well the whole point I'm trying to make to you here. And what it is it's illustrating to you the quantities of types of people that you're going to come across in this whole social journey. And here it is.
First of all, there are those who are there. There's the total number of people that are there at the venue or at the the club or the mall that you're going to or whatever. Out of those people, few will even notice. Among them, few will care. And among them, none can move you without your permission. So, the last thing that I'm going to say before signing off, ideally, what I want you to do is to have love for all, respect for the constructive, and compassion for the destructive. Thank you guys, and I will see you next week.